Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today we're talking about Star Wars Armada and asking the question, is it a stud or is it a dud? We're talking about the title for the Gladiator Star Destroyer Insidious today in this video. This is a title that many of you are probably unfamiliar with because it is usually foreshadowed by its big brother, the Demolisher. And I think it's actually an interesting title and it's worth talking about. I definitely think it's worth consideration, although it's not a very popular title. We're going to talk about why. I'm going to break down some different comparisons for this title and some ways possibly to use it. And finally asking the question, is it a stud or is it a dud? And of course, the answer doesn't stop with me. It keeps going with you guys too. You can let me know if you think it's a stud or a dud, if you think it's worth using, if you've ever used it before, or if you say, no way, there's no way I'm going to use that. Let me know down in the comment section. Also keep the discussion going in Discord. We are still doing that $50 Amazon gift card giveaway that's running through Halloween. You have plenty of time left to enter to win that. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. If you are living somewhere that does not celebrate Halloween, that is October 31st. So you have until the end of the month to enter to win this one. And if you don't win, don't worry, there's plenty more giveaways. We do them all the time. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the title Insidious. It's a 3-point title for the Gladiator. It says the black dice in your battery armament can be used at medium range. This effect applies only while attacking the rear hull zone of a ship. So initially, it's kind of cheap. It has a kind of cool effect. That's not the easiest thing to do. It's not the easiest thing to pull off. And that's one of the reasons why it's a problem. The other problem is that, well, there's a Demolisher as well that it's always going to be compared to. So if you're thinking about using this ship, obviously there's two types of Gladiator that you can equip it to, the Gladiator 1 and Gladiator 2. I think if you're going to be running this, the obvious choice here is to go for the Gladiator 1 in most cases if you were going to use it. Primarily because, well, you have more black dice on that ship, and this way, of course, you know, if it's a title that gives a bonus to your black dice, you want to maximize the amount of black dice you have. And thus, again, the Gladiator 1 is usually the ship that gets taken more often than not in the absence of any, you know, accuracy generation type effects. It's just generally the superior ship on top of being significantly cheaper. It also features more of what the Gladiator Star Destroyer is good at, and it's getting up close and personal and delivering black dice. And so we would want to use the Gladiator 1 for this one under most builds, I would imagine, if we were going to give it a shot. If we want to move forward and see why this is such a dismissed title to many, it's because, of course, it is foreshadowed by the overwhelmingly popular and insatiably good Demolisher title, which, of course, lets this guy attack after he moves, which is really the claim to fame and the title that sort of made the Gladiator Star Destroyer have a place in Star Wars Armada. It's not just a small ship that can throw black dice. It's a small ship that can move and break the cardinal rule of the game, is that you always shoot before you move. And he's like, no, we're going to move and we're going to shoot afterwards, which is totally amazing. Now, this Demolisher title had seen a change with Armada 1.5. It used to be that you could just do your attacks after you move, and now it's like you can only do one of your attacks after you move, and you can also only do one of your attacks before you move. And that really was the big change, is that you can't, you know, you're not only going to be able to just, you couldn't do both of your attacks after you moved. I misspoke. You actually would be able to, if you were able to last in first out, you could, you know, move, do that one attack, and then go first next turn, and then do like two if you had double arcs. You can do two more attacks. And so that was where it was most oppressive. So they nerfed that ability a little bit, that you can only do one after you move, which means, and therefore you can also only do one before you move. And so I guess maybe that's one shadow benefit of the Insidious, is that when you're using it, you're not given that negative of the Demolisher, is that you can do both of your attacks before you move. As a matter of fact, that's the only time you can do both of your attacks. It wasn't seen as much of a negative, though. Demolisher's still largely taken in like, I want to say 95 or higher percent of all Gladiator builds, although there have been some times where people will take the 7th Fleet Star Destroyer for some weird janky builds, usually only when they're taking more than one Gladiator. And that used to really be the only time anybody would take Insidious, is if they happen to be running 2 Gladiators instead of only 1. And of course you couldn't run 2 Demolishers. But if you were going to run a Gladiator, I think there's a Gladiator with Insidious. I think there's a couple of things that are, you know, generally probably going to happen, right? I obviously you need the title. I think engine techs is going to be stapled on. You need movement. You need to be able to get behind enemy ships, and engine techs is always a popular choice with Gladiators. Always has been. It's always been very popular with Demolisher. But I think with Demolisher, it's not mandatory. It's just a really nice benefit. But I don't run it on all of my Demolisher builds. It's nice to have, but it's not crucial. It's just it really helps the ship perform. But I think with Insidious, it's more crucial because you have to, you kind of have to attack a single arc. Now, when I say that, I say you kind of have to attack a single arc. I want to reinforce the thing. You don't have to attack the rear arc. You can still treat this as a black dice ship that can attack the front arc of ships. As you're making your approach, and if somebody tries to cap the T and turn directly into you and they give you the front of their ship, well, you'd be a fool not to attack the front. So, of course, whatever build you put on this is also something that's going to be able to attack other sides of the ships as well. So keep that in mind, is that you're not restricted to only attacking the rear. Don't pass up a golden opportunity to finish a ship off from the front just because you're trying to get around to the rear. And that's an important thing because it is only a 3-point title. If you end up not getting that awesome rear shot, well, it's only 3 points wasted. It's not like a 10-point title that you really need to make sure it works. 3 points is not the end of the world if you end up not getting that shot. So don't deliberately play poorly and maneuver yourself in a negative situation to try to get that rear shot just to make that title pay off. But that being said, Engine Text is going to help you get to that rear arc. It's a crucially important upgrade for this ship. And of course, that does mean you're going to be wanting to do nav an awful lot. Ordnance experts also, I would say, crucially important, although it is conceivable, although I wouldn't recommend it, but it's conceivable that you might consider gunnery teams on this, only because there is, and again, this is more of like a jokey thing, maybe something for like a 600 or 1,000 point battle or something like that. If you were able to get this behind an enemy fleet and they had enough ships, again, larger battles, they might have a lot more targets. Considering you got slightly extra range, there could be a situation where you actually fire twice. And maybe, but I only say that more anecdotally because you're not going to probably take that. But if you ever were going to take it, this would be the title to take it with. So if for some reason you had a challenge of, hey, I want you to run a Gladiator without Ordnance experts, or a Gladiator with gunnery team, you'd be like, okay, well, Insidious is the title to give that a shot with. Again, probably not going to line up because it's already hard enough to get the rear shot on an enemy ship, but let alone to get 2 rear shots, or you could have a close and a rear at medium as well as another possibility. But probably not going to happen. Stick with Ordnance experts. And an officer, I put Admiral Ozzel on there. There's other officer options, but I do like, you're going to either want somebody who's giving you movement speed, like I like Ozzel, or somebody who's giving you survivability. And of course, there are plenty of other options to get survivability. You could go with someone like Captain Brunson. You could go with Admiral Titus if you wanted to maybe slow another ship down or speed somebody up. You could go with Emperor Palpatine on there if you really wanted to do something crazy. You could go with Governor Price for your front shot, or if you're going with the Gladiator 2, maybe. There's weird things. But I like Ozzel. I like being able to move a little faster and be able to get out into position. It's an option, but there's trade-offs for that as well, which we are also going to talk about. What I didn't put in this of kind of a standard loadout is I didn't put our ordnance because, well, this is where there are differences. This is where there are options, and this is where it's largely up to you. I think there's basically 2 categories of what type of ordnance you're going to put on this ship. You're either going to put a black die crit effect, which is always a good thing to have, or you're going to put some black die additional battery modifications, a black die modification. Now, expanded launcher and rapid reload are interesting. Now, I will point out that in that dream scenario where you do gunnery teams, having expanded launchers could potentially be a really fun thing to do. So if you're trying a fun build, you're trying something a little janky, and you really do want to try for like this dream shot scenario where a gladiator has 2 enemy ships in range, and gunnery teams would work from the front arc. Maybe one's close range, maybe one's medium range, maybe they're both medium range, and he has both of their rears. That could really pay dividends with expanded launchers. It's possible. It is conceivable. And expanded launchers is just a cool card anyway, but it is outrageously priced at 13 points on a ship that is probably not going to live very long, especially if I see you coming at me and you've got expanded launchers on this ship, and I'm like, oh, you're running like almost 100-point ship right there coming at me. I'm, gladiators have a brace, but they're still gonna die. You just need an accuracy or two, and you can take out a gladiator pretty quickly. So think long and hard before you consider expanded launchers. Rapid reload is also a possible option. It's not a terrible option, although it doesn't really get taken as often because there are better ways. You have a pretty good chance of getting the black die crits, and then you've got assault protons and assault concussions that are both going to do a lot of damage, probably more so than what rapid reload would be, and at a cheaper price. Although it's not the perfect scenario, but it's definitely possible. And rapid reload, I bring that one up because it is worth considering for the role that this ship is trying to play. Like, it's trying to get kind of close, and it's trying to flank the enemy fleet, trying to get behind big ships, or any ship it can, really. And while doing that, it's possible it may be threading the needle through the enemy fleet, depending on how many activations. I think typically you want a high activation count if you're running this, so you can afford to go last with safety. If you can be first player, even better, so you can last in first out when the time is right to try to get in there. Of course, that's something you kind of usually want to do with small ships that are delicate. But I mean, for me, most of the time, I'll probably go with assault proton torpedoes. I like that, just that extra face-up damage, because that's before every, it's an extra damage on top of that. Assault concussion missiles also really nice. But again, if I'm attacking the rear, the rest of my fleet may be attacking the front, so that's why I like assault protons a little bit better. It's pretty cool stuff. Now, as far as commanders, there's a lot of different options. I picked a couple here. Now, I think Ozzel is probably the best commander, but that is only if you're not trying to run Ozzel as an officer. And so that you have a tough choice there, because I really like Ozzel as an officer. But for this ship, I think Ozzel as a commander is just really, really good. So you have that, that's as a decision for you guys at home, and let me know what you would rather do. Would you rather run a different officer, or would you rather run Ozzel Commander? I think a lot of people would probably choose Ozzel Commander. He's kind of OP right now at only 20 points for the amount of decision making that he takes away. He's like, I can just decide at the time if I want to change my speed, and that stacks with any nav tokens and nav commands I've already done. It's kind of crazy. I mean, you could even swap Ozzel out for like Minister Tua and put some extra defensive retrofit stuff on there. But normally I wouldn't think General Ramadi would work too well for Gladiator, but if you're doing that medium range shot against an enemy ship's rear, there's actually way more chance that it could be obstructed. You might actually be able to take advantage of that, and wouldn't that be cool? So that's something else that I thought was interesting to work with this guy. Darth Vader certainly works all around the board. He's and these are just certain options. I mean, I think you can go with the classic. Screed is also a really good one. There's as much as I want to say Mahdi to give it survivability, it is still only a small ship. So, again, your commander is going to depend largely on the rest of your fleet. Thrawn is also a good option. Tarkin can work. Tag can even work pretty well with these guys, because again, hey, you need to survive. I'll burn that brace, no problem. I'm getting it back next turn. Stuff like that. There's plenty of good options. I think for me, if I'm running Ozzel as an officer, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to go with Darth Vader as a commander. One of those reasons is I think that trying to make this title work is going to work better in a fleet that has a lot of ships, has a larger selection, an MSU type fleet. Maybe a Raider or two, a couple of Gazantes, maybe a Demolisher Gladiator also. Maybe a single large, maybe a Simoon, that's like lightly equipped as a flagship or something like that. But I probably want at least 5 activations, if not more. And Invader can give an awful lot of rerolls and stuff to a ship that's ships that are doing that. Architans, for example, a lot of Architans in the list. Great way to do it. We don't really need the Simoon, as a matter of fact, if we're doing all of that. We don't really need Intensify Firepower if everybody's got plenty of rerolls, and Vader can do that. He is still kind of crazy expensive for the amount of utility that he gives, but it's still pretty cool. Again, it depends on what you're doing, because if you're going to go with Ozzel as an officer, maybe you can have Vader as an officer in your fleet. Maybe you'll be in range of using the Vader officer to choke out Ozzel. There's a lot of different ways to make that work, but those are some different commander options. It's always a tough choice. But those are some ways that you might look at running Insidious. It's still going to be a ship that kind of has to get up close and personal to enemy ships. Might not survive very long. Maybe you don't want to put too many upgrades on it. Maybe you want to try it a little more bare bones. A lot of very interesting thoughts. Let me know some of your thoughts down in the video description below, because it's time to ask the question, is it a stud or is it a dud? Now, it's a tough question. I've laid out some ways that you can make it work. Ultimately, it leans more towards the dud side for me, mostly because of Demolisher. I usually don't want to run more than one of these guys, but there's definitely ways to use it. And the fact that I'm not calling it a stud doesn't mean that it's not good. It's definitely somewhere in the middle, but I think it leans a little bit more on the undesirable side because it's overshadowed by this immensely popular Big Brother title that it has. It's one of those deals where if the Demolisher title didn't exist, this would probably be seen as a decent title at a respectable cost. But maybe the Gladiator as a whole wouldn't be seen as that desirable of a ship, considering everything else. But that being said, I think I'm going to try to put Insidious to work a little bit more in the future, and I challenge you to do so as well, and let me know what you come up with down in the comments and in our Discord. Keep the discussion going. A lot of people are playing Star Wars Armada. It's one of the most popular states it's ever been in, ever since the AMG making the big stink that they're not making anything else for it. I think it's just been growing and growing since then. So it's a pretty exciting time to be an Armada player, and there's supposed to be some new stuff coming out soon, potentially any day now, or probably in the next couple of weeks. Probably, I'm guessing November is what it sounds like. But we'll be talking about that as it comes out. So that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. The spice must flow. So say we all. You can't take the sky from me. And always wash your socks.